Whoa, full house. And familiar faces. This is good. Can you hear me all right? Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I feel like Madonna. It's such a treat to be here at the museum. 100 years ago, this is where I did one of my very first talks as part of a panel on mid-century design, so I'm particularly grateful to have been invited back. You said this thing is a little wonky, and I think it's being wonky. Is that correct? You want me to use that? Or are we okay? Are we okay? Jeepers, now I have to multitask. Back when I was a fashion designer and we were rehearsing for one of our runway shows at Bryant Park, one of the stylists working with me, actually it was Robert Ruffino, said, "Aren't you afraid that someone's going to throw a ham at that dress?" And the same thing applies to these kind of presentations, so I beg of you, hold on to your hams. With me tonight is Bill's wonderful right hand, John Kurdewan. Let's say hello to John and welcome him.
Hello, thank you, thank you.
So from the late 1970s until the spring of 2016, for nearly 4 decades, the most discerning eye on fashion, whether it was on the runways of Paris or the streets of New York, belonged to one unassuming individual who truly defied description, the extraordinary Bill Cunningham. He was so much more than a photographer. I'm not telling you all anything new. He was a true chronicler and interpreter of fashion and personal style. Club kids posed for him, socialites preened for him, and Anna Wintour, the high priestess of fashion, and of course you know the editor-in-chief of Vogue, kowtowed to him. That's Anna calling now. Happens every time you mention her name. Or dogs gather in packs and walls drip blood. So as you, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to have lunch in this town again. So you know that Bill was eccentric, fiercely ethical, and many times childlike in his demeanor. He was definitely a loner, although he had a very wide circle of acquaintances and some very close friends, John being one of them. So we're going to talk about your experiences working for Bill, but let's first give everyone a little background. Okay, please move. There we go. Okay. Just makes you smile, doesn't it? So for all of us here who have worked or lived in the city, especially those of us who had to frequent the corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street, Bill was as much a part of New York as the Statue of Liberty. And if he was there at a charity gala or a party that you were at, well, you knew immediately that you were at the center of the universe. And many times, that was right here in this building. But there's an important backstory to tell. Born in Boston to an Irish Catholic family, Bill was admitted to Harvard on a scholarship but lasted only 2 months. Instead, he hightailed it to New York and got into the training program at Bonwit Teller, the exquisite carriage trade specialty store that was demolished in the dark of night by you-know-who in order to build you-know-what. But Bonwit's training program required Bill to work in pretty much every department: advertising, publicity, the Christmas shop, even shipping. But most importantly, this is where he met the owners of Chez Ninon, a New York couture salon within the store that specialized in perfect and, more importantly, authorized copies of Paris originals. In the exact same fabric, the same buttons, the same trim, but made in America, which is why their most famous client was Jackie Kennedy. The owners, Nona Park and Sophie Chenard, took a shining to Bill and discovered that he had a very unique talent. Bill was a self-taught milliner, and he was really, really good. He was staying with an uncle on Park Avenue and set up a clandestine workroom in one of the maid's bedrooms. While this eventually got him thrown out of the apartment, bad uncle, it got him into his own little apartment with his own business. Now, you actually saw the building that Bill lived in, didn't you?
One night I was walking with Bill. We were going over to Carnegie Hall Medal of Excellence that he was receiving. We were walking over to the Waldorf Astoria, and he goes, as we're cutting through the side streets and you're walking with Bill, he says, look, this building, I used to live here, and this is where I did all my hats. And I'm like, wait, this building? And it was a really nice looking building, but this is one of the things where out of the complete blue, Bill would just tell you a story that brought him right back to yesteryear for him.
So through the Shaining On ladies, he was able to get the financial backing of Rebecca Harkness, the wife of William Hale Harkness, the Standard Oil heir. Did you all know that Taylor Swift now lives in her house in Watch Hill, Rhode Island? Anyway, here's Bill in his showroom, the definition of youth and ambition and self-confidence, but not completely. He wouldn't use his full name, preferring to call himself simply William J. John, wasn't that because he's a little squeamish about how his family would react?
He didn't, yeah, exactly. He just wanted to keep himself distanced from his family, and it was just one of those things at that time where you didn't go into fashion.
Now, in his memoir, Fashion Climbing, he said that for one opening, he had over 500 people at his little studio, including all of the Kennedy sisters. I think that might have been a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah, that was a book he actually had in the bottom of his filing cabinet. As you know from the documentary, he had these metal filing cabinets everywhere. That was locked up. He pointed it out to me every time we were there.
In the middle of this, in 1952, Bill was drafted during the Korean War. Mrs. Harkness wanted him to try to avoid going because they were doing well and suggested that he claim that he had bone spurs. But he was... but he was patriotic and not a pathological liar and felt that it was his duty. So... I guess I'm among friends. It's a very bad week. So he borrowed $1,000 from his uncle to pay her off.
To pay her off so he can go into the military.
So he was fortunately stationed in France, which would impact him for the rest of his life. After his tour of duty, Bill returned to his millinery business in 1954. He had definite talent, an uncanny eye for proportion and detail. And the whimsical, a stark contrast to his preppy Ivy League appearance and patrician Boston accent. He was called the Mad Hatter of hat making by the Boston Globe, but more importantly, he had a nose for women who would get noticed and a taste for high society. As an admirer, not for the money, but for the good it could do. He even made hats for Marilyn Monroe, Katharine Hepburn, and through Shaining On, Jackie Kennedy. In November 1963, the ladies asked Bill to take a simple red Shaining On suit and dye it black and make a veil for the president's funeral, which is probably one of the most iconic images of our times. And as much as Bill admired Jackie for her work saving Grand Central Station and raising her children beautifully, they weren't close.
No, not as close as everyone would think.
Here he is commenting on one of his early shows, as all designers did back in the day. This one is in his first apartment in Carnegie Hall. And what may look like a casually folded napkin was really an intricately constructed hat. He loved to take common, everyday motifs and make them special, and that was his gift. He found beauty everywhere and in everything. Ultimately, after an 8-year run, the hat business began to wane due to the popularity of what? The bouffant hairdo. So you can blame Jackie and her hairdresser. In 1963, Bill made the transition from milliner to fashion journalist, beginning, oddly enough, with the Chicago Tribune as their New York and Paris fashion and social reporter. While he was based here in New York, he would spend 4 months in Paris every year, covering the haute couture scene in great detail. And for many years, he would lecture on the seasonal trends for fashion groups in New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia. So here he is with his first camera, given to him by celebrity photographer David Montgomery, who was the first American to ever formally photograph Queen Elizabeth. He moved to the UK in the 1960s and is still there. He built a following among fashion-oriented publications, not just the Chicago Trib, but Women's Wear Daily, the New York Times, Vogue, and others. What kind of camera was this?
This was a half frame, what you would do. It was 72 images that Bill can get on a camera.
Always economical.
Yeah.
This page is from the early 70s, and the headline is "From the New York City Showings of Swimwear," featuring both Bill's photography and considerable copy. This is back when there was something in every newspaper archaically called the women's section, or in the case of the Trib, Feminique. Doesn't it sound like something you should buy at Walgreens? So, horrible. He freely admitted that he possessed an extremely acute sense for discovering what will be fashion years before anyone else. His observations were always accurate, not only artistically, but commercially. He knew how to pick winners from every collection. And when you read Fashion Climbing or any of his, the notes that he left, he always spoke about his realization that he had this gift. It was a little self-aggrandizing, but he knew he was special. Ultimately, he added more sophisticated cameras, but that Olympus Pen D remained his favorite simply because of the economy of it.
The economy of it and saving film, just doing it that way.
Where's the camera now?
Bill gave it to me one day with a print, and he says, "Don't ever sell this. Keep it. Don't ever give it up to anyone." And it actually still works to this day.
Can you still get the film for it?
Yes, you can.
Soon, Bill also became a fixture on the social scene. Just as he had a nose for fashion, he had a knack for being in the right place at the right time, especially if it had a high society connection. Now, in 1963, when Bill first began to contribute to Women's Wear Daily, the mercurial publisher, John Fairchild, gave Bill his own column, much to the chagrin of his fellow staffers. And this lasted for about 10 months until they had a major falling out over the importance of Courrèges versus Saint Laurent.
And, that was the whole argument, but to the very end, Bill did cover his funeral, did go to his funeral, and it did go into the New York Times.
But he never worked for Women's Wear Daily again.
We read it every day, though. He would sit there and read it every day.
So Bill was out on his own again and remained an independent contractor for the bulk of his career. By this time, he was a regular contributor to the Times. He became a bona fide member of what eventually became the photographer's mosh pit, here awaiting the swells at the Met Gala, back when it was a good party. That's...
I don't know. It's
or at least a party that I would get invited to. That's Bernadine Morris from the New York Times. I adored her in the black pantsuit and short gray hair. The wonderful Nina Hyde, the late Nina Hyde in Pearls from the Washington Post. Dan Lecca from the Times, one of the world's foremost runway photographers. And with costume designer Michelle Rimbaud and Bill, notice the feather. This was the splendid plumage party thrown by Dior at the New York Public Library. So we fast forward a few decades, and this is the Bill Cunningham that most of us knew in his carefully crafted persona. A cap, the blue French workman's jacket, always riding his bike, whatever the season, whatever the weather, whatever the time of day. He was fiercely independent, eccentric, ethical beyond words, and totally single-minded in his pursuit. But journalism isn't a solitary pursuit. It demands a platform. Bill had no problem there. His audience hung on his every photo, his words, his notice. But to do this with the kind of success that Bill had took a lot more than one man with a camera on a bicycle. And that one of those people is to my left. So John, why you? How did you become Bill's right hand? I'm going to embarrass you a little bit and show a cute picture.
We were the odd couple of all people that you could throw together in a single day at the New York Times.
This is you as a young boy growing up on the Jersey Shore. I think you said you're about 5 years old here?
Yes, one of 9, so everything was a hand-me-down for me. So
including the baseball glove.
the baseball glove, which was left-handed, but I'm right-handed. So you had to learn how to throw either way. So
You lived in Neptune until you were 24 years old, and then you bought your first home.
Further down the shore, down in Brick. So we went down there, and
Beautiful, the Jersey Shore. And we're going to show Mika.
Mika and Thor. Bill loved it when I would come in with these photos of the dogs because he had 2 French poodles, and he would talk about his dogs all the time, but he would have to bike home real quick to go let out his dogs. And I said, that's why I have sisters. Call them up.
This is the Asbury Park Press, now a Gannett paper. At its peak, it was the second largest daily in New Jersey behind the New York Star-Ledger. How did you get to the press?
It was a toss-up between working for Coca-Cola or working at the Asbury Park Press. And I hate sweating out there in the heat, so when I was younger in high school, I decided to go to the Asbury Park Press, and I started we called it back then, it was called engraving. That's where we did all the photos.
So otherwise, you would have been
On a
driving a Coke truck.
Yeah. So, big changes.
I know you worked there for 13 years. You had wonderful on-the-job training. Apple computers were introduced into the newspaper world in 1995. We now I think we called it desktop publishing then. And you took to it, didn't you?
I took to it. I just did it on my own, self-taught, and then the New York Times was going color in 1997. So by chance, by grace of whatever, I got the job at the New York Times. That's when I first met Bill Cunningham.
Originally, all of Bill's photos were in black and white, and he needed a lot of attention. He was called the king of subs, meaning just one more. Now, newspapers are highly unionized, so there's a very special hierarchy from Bill to the scanner, back to Bill, to any available art director, back to the bucket. What's the bucket?
The bucket was where you dropped off the dreaded pages that you didn't want to touch. Bill's pages were the dreaded pages because there was usually 30 to 40 images in those pages. So it would sit there.
So here you are at your desk looking very much like Jeff Bridges in The Big Lebowski.
This was my Halloween outfit I picked up, and Bill said, "You look like that guy." So he made me tilt the monitor towards him so I could take this photo. But the great thing is that he used that sweater as a pillow when he would come back from the parties. He would have to go take a quick nap, so he would sit behind me, and then I would wake him up and say, "All right, come on, back to work."
So once the Times went totally digital in 2009, Bill actually joined you at your desk on the 7th floor.
Yes, we were joined at the hips, just like we are right now.
So we know that Bill started contributing to the Times in '78 with unposed party pictures of high society peeps and fashion shots taken on the street. Here he is captured by another legendary photographer, wonderful Mary Hilliard. Not only did they work together do the same gigs, but they were close friends. So this is the It page. His editor said that this was a turning point for the Times because it was the first time the paper had run pictures of well-known people without getting their permission. Here you have Mirella Agnelli, I think she just passed away, Stanley Marcus, Gloria Vanderbilt, Patricia Kennedy Lawford, and Greta Garbo. These were all chance meetings with Bill's camera.
And he didn't realize it was Greta Garbo because he was more focused on her coat. Then someone at the New York Times pointed out that's Greta Garbo, who then tried to did sue the New York Times, but she lost. And that's why if you're on the street, you're public domain.
So this evolved into the On the Street and Evening Hours features, which became regular weekly features in 1989. John, when did you first touch one of Bill's pages?
Oh my God! To be honest, it was probably in 98. I think that's when
you joined the Times.
Joined the Times that you did the black and white page. At that time, all Bill's party pages were black and white because he didn't realize he could get it in color.
Now, as much as we like to think that Bill was spry and lithe and a terrific cyclist, it was really more the perils of Pauline.
93, he got hit by a truck and he was dragged a couple of blocks. That's when he joined the New York Times, just so we could get him to have benefits, because Bill would write a check for everything.
And then there was a second accident where he ran into a curb and broke his kneecap.
His kneecap, that was a terrible accident, but he was right back to work the next day.
And then the third accident when
he was going home late at night. He never had a headlight on his bike. Hit the curb.
Why didn't someone just call him a car?
4 stitches later.
So here you are laying out a page.
As you can see, we're doing it very intensely. Everything was intense with us.
Now, this made you crazy. Tell us the story of what's going on here.
Well, Bill loved to point out a photo to tell me where to place it. So we just happened to have Chinese food delivered, and I gave him the chopstick from the Chinese food. And then he became the conductor after that. It was like conducting an opera every week.
The emergence of the skinny trouser and high-heeled boot as day wear, something we all take for granted now. Beautiful reporting on a trend. Look at that rainbow. And Bill loved Natalie-dressed men. Tell us, John, about the guy in the hat with the mustache.
Nemo is one of his guys that he would see on Fifth Avenue, always impeccably dressed. Bill loved photographing him. He's actually a tailor himself, and they would talk shop all the time.
And a quintessential Evening Hours page. Bill loved showing a repetitive trend, and here he makes the point about the undisputed dominance of the black evening gown. Look in the lower left. Now, for such an erudite gentleman, he liked a little horseplay. Here's a little lightsaber versus a baseball bat. Was this stuff common?
This was common. Andy Chen has all the toys and everything, and every once in a while, to break up the intensity of a page, Bill would always say, "I'm going to knock your block off." So
Bill's birthday was always a cause for celebration. Do I see an edible arrangement there?
Yes, you do.
But I can smell it from here.
Those were good parties to get invited to.
Yeah. Tell us, though, about what's really going on here.
Well, Bill always hated celebrating his birthday, and he would tell me every year, "Look, you're not going to do anything." And I'm like, "What makes you think I like you that much?" And we would always do it, and the owner of the New York Times would actually come down, and he would make me wait so he could see me sweat. And like, I would have to physically pull him out of the elevator to get in there. And this year, we brought him his first brand new bike. It's a European bike that we got him. So
here he is showing off his new bike to a coworker. Now, when I first saw this, I said, "Is that a girl's bike?" But no.
That is not a girl's bike. That was for him to step through.
It's a European
so he
walk-through
lift
bike.
his leg as he was getting older. We didn't want to make it more difficult.
Now, he loved his LL Bean storm coat and, of course, his street sweeper coats. But I just learned today that he had a U.S. resource to buy the blue jackets.
A red cap. When the French coats were getting overpriced and he wasn't traveling that much, we would order him coats so he would have backups.
So mine's coming tomorrow, and I'm going to wear it with pride. But John, does this photo also remind you of something else?
Bill came back and he goes, "Kurdewan, you're not going to believe what I did." I'm like, "What?" "I was at the Frick. It was late. My lock froze." I'm like, "Wow, what'd you do?" He goes, "I did what you had to do to get the lock unfrozen." I'm like, "In front of the Frick?" And he goes, "Oh my God, I was so embarrassed. Thank God no one was there." And it was classic Bill, you know.
Resourceful Bill.
Yeah.
Here's one of the thousands of notes Bill would write to you.
Bill would write you a note when he wanted you to get the point, or he was trying to tell you something. And I'm sure a lot of you guys received personal notes from Bill with a photo.
So much of Bill's personal life revolved around the very unique place he lived, in one of the artist studios above Carnegie Hall. Bill's apartment was on the inner corner facing west, just below the top floor. The address was 881 7th Avenue, called the Carnegie Hall Towers, designed by the same architect who did the Dakota and the Plaza. And it was done purely as a source of income for Carnegie Hall. And since the heyday of the bohemian 1950s, it was home to people like portrait photographer Edita Sherman, a great friend of Bill's who lived there since 1949, with a husband and 5 children.
Yep.
And over the decades, the towers saw Mark Twain in the Authors Club, Marlon Brando, painters, poets, photographers, composers. It was similar to the Chelsea Hotel. The last residents were moved out in 2010. John, were you ever in that apartment?
I was fortunate enough to go over there, and as I was in there, you know, you get a sense of everything that Bill had. It was all in one room. He had filing cabinets. He had his coat hanging on a filing cabinet, but you got to meet Mrs. Sherman, who was, she was a character in herself.
And there was a communal kitchen and a shared bath down the hall, which Bill loved.
Because he didn't have to clean it. That was his way of getting out of it.
Who wants to clean a bathroom after all? Here, let's go this way. Okay, so here's Edita, the model for Bill's piece called Facades. This was a collaborative 8-year project between the two of them beginning in 1968. And it involved Bill photographing Edita, who was also a photographer herself, in period costumes in unlikely locations. It was a complete essay on the juxtaposition of time and place and the history of dress and of New York City. Bill donated the complete work to the New York Historical Society in '78, but it wasn't exhibited until 2014, and it's currently touring. When John and I spoke at Rosecliff in Newport last December,
Yep.
the exhibit was there. It was a very fluid time, and not all unusual for marriages to accommodate, let's just say, a third wheel. Here's Bill with Bert and Lorraine Geiger, and Bert and Bill remained close, extremely close friends for their entire life. Frolicking in Tarrytown at Lyndhurst, the former Jay Gould estate, which became a museum in 1961, and this photo was taken by Bert Geiger. Bert and Bill looking like an old married couple. And Lorraine Geiger was a wonderful illustrator, and she did this cartoon of Bill on the street. So who knows, maybe they were what we now call a throuple. Bill's friendship with fashion illustrator Antonio Lopez was one of the defining relationships of his life. This is taken in 1978. They were total opposites but besties, total kindred spirits. And a 1970s Antonio fashion illustration. Artist, designer, he defined the disco era and inspired countless fashion designers. He and his partner Juan also happened to be Bill's neighbors at Carnegie Hall. It was like one big Melrose Place of fabulousness.
Yeah.
Here's a contact sheet from one of those wild and crazy nights at Carnegie Hall. Partying, posing, open bar. But Bill was not a drinker.
Bill never drank in his life, and he told me that many times because we would try to get him to go out.
In fashion climbing, he said, I thought it dulled the mind and I didn't like the taste. Not me. Here's Bill with his sister Peg and his nephew Joe Bird in Marshfield, Massachusetts. This is south of Boston. And Bill actually had his own little getaway there.
His nephew built over his garage as a room for Bill, beautiful room. And Bill, when he went up to Boston, he would stop off and see Joe Bird, and he would stay 1 or 2 days and come back. So the connection of everyone saying, you know, did Bill have family was always a joke to.
So now we know he had love in his life. He had a beach house, and he died with $3 million in the bank. Bill knew something. Diana DeMena, one of his great friends, a Broadway producer and philanthropist.
Bill knew Diana through Diana's mother, Helen, who knew Jane Engelhardt, who she worked for. which is Annette's mom.
And Diana recently produced the revival of The Iceman Cometh on Broadway. Suzette, Tony Suzette Cimino, they were best friends from his very first apartment in the West 50s. She was a florist. She did the flowers for Le Cirque back in the day and was named as heir to his estate in one of the 2 fully executed wills that he left, typical Bill. But she died the year before Bill.
He was heartbroken over that. 60 years they were good friends.
In 2007, Carnegie Hall Corporation announced they would demolish the residential studios in order to create educational and rehearsal spaces. My guess is they also wanted to sell the air rights. It took about 3 years to get everyone out. The $200 million project was to be completed in 2014, and frankly, I don't know if it ever was. You'll have to tell me. But this is the loft of the Carnegie Hall apartment, isn't it?
This is the loft where the guys at Carnegie Hall built stairs, wooden stairs that were shaky. I couldn't stand up there. I had to hunch over, and that's where Bill kept some files and his bed, his famous bed that everyone knows.
They moved him to 240 Central Park South. Bill was given his pick of several apartments, and Carnegie Hall subsidized the rent for the remainder of Bill's life. Do you know how much it was?
I believe it was only $200, and
month.
Bill had taken all the doors out of the apartment so he could store more stuff in there.
He brought his bed with him, no different than before.
No, 4 milk crates, 3-inch, 3¼ inch plywood, and a foam mattress.
The definition of eccentric. But here he is hanging his beloved parrots, stained glass parrots in the window of the new apartment. He loved those, didn't he?
He loved those. He got those parrots in Paris from a cafe. The guy was desperate for money. Bill happened to have money on him. Guy was losing in gambling, and
Well, Bill didn't have credit cards, right? He only carried cash.
He only carried cash.
And there you are on his bookshelf.
I was shocked that one day I walked in and I saw that picture of me. I'm like, oh my God. You know, you're not.
Don't be so shocked.
You're shocked when you see yourself up there.
Every year, Bill would have a party to watch the Thanksgiving Day parade. Here's one of the passes that the guests needed to get through the barricades. He'd have 10 to 15 of his close friends, including you.
And my mom would make Thanksgiving dinner, send it up, and everyone that was invited to the party had to bring something. So we had treats for days.
Let's talk about the gals that have consistently appeared in Bill's pages. This is where you can start throwing hams at me if I haven't included you. So I'm going to go way back. Truman Capote called his pack his swans, women like CZ Guest, Slim Keith, Lee Radziwill, and most famously, Babe Haley. And Bill had his swans too. Of course, Brooke Astor. Did you ever meet her?
I never met her, but Bill spoke fondly of her, and you were never allowed to say anything bad about.
And he
people
was
he
the
cared
only
about.
photographer allowed at her 100th birthday party. One lady, decades of pictures. This ran in 2007 upon Brooke's death at the age of 105. And with her passing, Bill lost a friend and an icon.
And we took great pride in building this page because we took our time. We wanted to make sure he covered her totally.
Gloria Guinness, forever on the best dressed list, and also one of Truman Capote's favorites. Wonderful Carmen Del Orefice, ageless. She actually modeled in one of my first runway shows. Believe it or not, we cast her as the bride. The audience went wild. We have Joan Weil and Mercedes Bass.
He always enjoyed New Yorkers that gave back to the city and not just was taking. He always loved that about everyone from New York.
Now, here we see Jamie Gregory in a classic Bill moment when 2 gals show up in the same dress. And the woman on the left is Karen Lafrac.
He had to put them together. When he spots someone wearing the same dress, he has to merge them
And
together.
I think that this is one of the only instances where Bill would actually stage a photo. I don't think anyone dressed up for Bill with as much exuberance as Jean Shafiroff. She still wears the biggest ball gowns, and Bill adored her.
Bill adored her, and was always impressed because at the same event, she would have a different outfit on when he went to go shoot someone else, and she would come back, and it would be a different outfit. So
I think she would sometimes change 3 times a night, and that's the definition of a true fashionista. And our great friend Alexandra Liebenthal wearing a gown that I actually designed for her. I know that she tried to help Bill get his finances in order.
Well, trying to get his affairs in order is what she was doing, that Bill trusted her. He gave her all that information, which I was shocked that she received it all, because the phone would ring constantly, and I would be the intermediary between the two of them, like, Bill, phone call. Okay, I'm too busy.
You should have listened to her, but Bill got spooked.
Yes.
Shame. So here, at the Central Park Luncheon, Gillian Miniter and a hat decorated with butterflies. Amy Hoadley and Eric Javits, of course, the well-known milliner. Gorgeous lady at the hat luncheon. Bill could always find the best-looking dresses, the best-looking hats. Diamondo, Eric Javits' partner and a favorite subject of Bill's. I mean, how could he not be? Arriving in a Rolls Royce. Now, Bill first went to Paris as a GI, but it truly became a second home for him. Look how happy he is. With Coco Chanel. John, how is Bill's French?
Bill actually spoke good French, but it was kind of funny with that Boston accent. So that was
One of Bill's own shots before the Chanel show in the Grand Palais. And the Paris page. Always one of Bill's best, where he discussed the trends with incredible accuracy. How big is this page?
This page was our largest ever, 82 images, downloaded 6,000 images because he was now using digital, and he said those little cards hold that many photos. So it was Pandora's box for us, or for me.
It took 2 days to produce the page, and he did that with a full party schedule and still managed to create this at the age of 80. And notice the rainbow effect. That's totally deliberate. He really did paint with pictures. And this is his Rocky moment. Truly the champion of fashion photojournalists. So as we've discussed, as much as Bill lived for fashion, he was also an astute observer of high society. He would always don a tuxedo for black tie galas. I think to be inconspicuous more than anything else, the blue jacket would stand out too much. That's Doris Duke, the elusive heiress, and I think Liz Roden. Oh, thank you. I don't know how to correct a PowerPoint while I'm doing it, but I'll remember. Bill at Tommy Hilfiger's 30th anniversary show at the Park Avenue Armory in 2015.
I was fortunate enough to go. Bill said, I want you to go to this because it has a football theme. So I had no ticket. All he said is, he's with me. They said, okay, go that way. So
And you took this picture.
I did take this picture. I was right behind him.
Now you're on the way to a gala. Which one?
We were going to the Met Ball. This is when he broke his kneecap, and I was his walking cane, I think.
Meeting on a winter. Where is this?
This was at the World of Astoria when he was getting the Medal for Excellence from Carnegie Hall. And he called her over, and she came, and I was scared. I was like, what do you say to her?
But she took her sunglasses off for you.
She did, and she said, you're in the documentary. And I said, and you are too.
Well,
And that's why she smiled, because the woman that took the photo said, oh my God, how'd you get her to smile? I said,
well, because you were probably
Well,
one of the
with
few
Bill.
guys that she could actually flirt with, if you catch my drift. Two fashion icons and contrast in size. Bill and Vogue's Andre Leon Talley.
Totally loved him. He would
How
always
could you
talk.
not?
Yeah.
How could you not? Here you are with designer Jeremy Scott at the Met Gala. Now, in 2015, I wrote a book about 40 years of the Kips Bay decorator show house, and Bunny Williams and her husband, John Rosselli, threw a book party for me. And look who showed up. Total surprise. And I look like I'm smiling, but honestly, I could barely hold back the tears. And I love this shot of Bill with my other half, Rich. Rich, wave your hand. Here. And who'd have thunk it? The following Sunday, there we were. And this is one of my only 2 times in color in Bill's page, making it a grand total of 4, but each one of them a total treasure. And here we have some of Bill's wonderful coverage of the Director's Circle galas that took place right here at the museum. And while the development and publicity team would always make sure that he shot the key players, the chairs, the major donors, it was the fashion that would always drive the photos. And look at that fabulous, fabulous miniature.
Once
Amazing.
again, Bill would find the details and everything. He would go to extremes to make sure the reader understood what he was looking for. I always called it a pocketbook, and he would always pick on me. You know,
Wow.
he goes, "Where'd you learn that?" My mother, you know.
Well, all I can say is a certain lady in this room knows how to accessorize. As much as Bill loved New York, and for a born and bred Bostonian, believe it or not, like me, could not have been the more quintessential New Yorker. He would venture beyond the city limits and the essential fashion capital of Paris and Milan pretty regularly, but mostly in the summer. He loved the Fire Island Pines Dance Festival. He first published pictures of a fundraiser on Fire Island in 1979 and made coverage of the gay community mainstream at the Times. He covered AIDS benefits, pride parades, even Wigstock, the huge drag festival. It was always on his tour of duty. And pretty much every year, he'd be on the prowl in Southampton, which traditionally has two big galas, one for the Parish Art Museum and one for Southampton Hospital, also one for the Watermill Arts Center, which he loved for its exuberance. Here's his coverage of Bridgehampton Polo, where, for those of you who have gone, you know that most people are too busy posing and partying to watch the actual match. Split between Newport Jazz Festival and the Southampton Hospital Party, Bill was the Energizer Bunny personified, and yes, that is a chubbier me dancing. That today, it takes 5, 6, 7 people to do what Bill did.
To do what Bill does, he was incredible how much he ran around doing everything. He would cover 16, 17 parties by himself every week. He was on the street for 10 hours a day. It was really bad. He was
Another
incredible.
polo and hospital party split, and believe it or not, the son of Bill's early nemesis, John Fairchild, James, with his then wife, Whitney, and the Southampton Hospital Party, tea house of the August Moon, and even chubbier me. And that's when I realized that I needed to shut my mouth and get on the treadmill. Now, that same year, he took notice of a certain trend on the dance floor, and he devoted an entire page to it. And I know because my name is on the labels of all those dresses. And the following year, he took a shining to chinoiserie trousers and shorts that I did. So I truly owe my career to Bill. Here's beautiful Laura Freeman, the Southampton Hospital Party's chairlady that year, and our hostess tonight. And this is one of the most personally special places for Bill, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. It was built in the style of a Venetian palazzo. It's filled with John Singer Sargent portraits. If you've never been, get on the train, go up there and see it. It's very, very special.
I was fortunate enough to go with Bill that year when they were installing the Nershams, the
Nasturtiums, yeah.
Nasturtiums, and I actually took this photo because he was so into it, and you're not allowed to touch anything, but he didn't understand that rule, but
He's Bill Cunningham. Nothing applies to him. This was another one of Bill's happy places, Newport, Rhode Island. Coaching weekend was very, very special. Bill's love of fantasy and history and vintage clothing captivated both him and his camera. And he adored the great ladies of Newport. Here he is with the late Otzi Charles. To Bill, she embodied everything that he loved about Newport. She was truly a person with provenance. And as some of you may know, her grandson, Nick Maley, has become quite the photographer himself. But the minute that people appeared in vintage dress, he was like a kid in a candy store. And of course, he was enthralled by the balls. For Bill, they presented the complete package: spectacular venues, grand gowns, music, and dancing. His Newport pages showed his delight and were frequently informed by the John Singer Sargent paintings that he loved so much. Look at Pamela O'Connor in the upper right in the large hat. That's from 1999, but it could easily be inspired by a Sargent portrait. Preservation Society's 60th anniversary ball, a Chinese theme, a nod to the Breakers Tea House from 2005. And here Newport shares a page with Millbrook in 2007. Always a love affair with hats and a theme. Number 17 is Fernanda Kellogg, who founded the Fitch's Corner Horse Trials, benefiting the volunteer fire department. And she's wearing a hat decorated with a chicken. And the final Newport Vintage Dance Week in 2012. For Bill, that was the end of an era. But he'd always come back from Newport a new man.
He always did. He came back rejuvenated, and he was ready to go, and we spent hours building those pages.
Now, much to Bill's annoyance, he finally had to say yes to a documentary about his career. How'd that come about?
Well, Richard Press and Philip Gefter were bothering Bill for about 10 years, and then Arthur Sulzberger came to Bill and said, could you help us out? This would help make the paper look good.
I think the exact quote was, the Times could use a boost.
Basically.
And suddenly, the intrepid reporter became the reluctant subject. Here he is at an event with Kim Hastreiter, the co-founder and co-editor of Paper magazine, and being greeted by Iris Apfel, sort of a kindred spirit, and also the subject of a documentary.
She was very, he loved her, but sometimes overbearing sometimes.
Any of you that know Iris understand what we're talking about. She gives good Iris. There he is with Elton John and the late Karl Lagerfeld, the maestro of Chanel. And at the iconic this is the old Four Seasons restaurant, where they would throw a fabulous through the kitchen party to benefit the Cancer Research Institute. I think it still goes on in its 35th year. I don't know where it's going on, but
the great photographer on this was Michael Bloomberg. Took this photo. He did a great job. I mean,
so the ravages of time began to take their toll on Bill. We knew his hearing was going, and while he insisted on riding his bike, the mishaps became more frequent, and this is really when he really would start to lean on you more.
he would lean on me more, and I was take more responsibility, but it was easy. And I think this is when I took him to church. I called it church, where it was lunchtime for us.
Yeah, it's a church, meaning that it was a bar.
We went to, and I took him to his first bar. So he couldn't get over the size of the TVs. That's all he kept on saying. Bill only had a Coca-Cola, and I had the Heineken, so that's...
The bar, if you want to go, the bar is called Stitches. Get it? It's in the Garment Center. It's called Stitches.
And he loved the sewing machine that they still have over the window.
But he was unselfish to a fault in ways that are hard to convey. I think you have a little something to share with us. Why don't I put this up? Ready?
Yeah, John, it's just Bill. I just got in from work, and I hate bothering you, but I just want to know that how things were with the hospital and your mother, and with you. And I know it's a time to leave you alone, probably, but if you need friendship or something, think of me as your big old uncle. But at any rate, if you're up and around or you come in and you feel like it, give me a call if you want to talk, or don't call because you may not want to talk. See you later, you fella.
Isn't that great?
That was 4 days before he got ill.
So this shot has so much meaning. In all the years that I saw Bill at parties, he would never accept even a glass of water, let alone a bite of food.
This was at the hat luncheon, and he said, Kurdewan, do you think anyone would mind if we took some bread off that table? And I texted our friend Diana, and she goes, where are you? I said, hey, I found where the bar is. She goes, get a table. Next thing we know, we're sitting at a table, and these guys come over with trays of food. And he allowed Diana
a table for two
to take this photo of us. And as you can see, Bill is actually chewing food, so that was like a blessing.
Finally had a meal at a party.
And he was like, I have energy now. I'm like, that's the blood level, and you know, blood sugar and everything. So
Bill suffered a stroke in 2016, and while he fought like the devil, even attempting to work from his hospital bed, it was just too much. and he died on June 25th at the age of 87. So tell us about this moment.
This is Joanne Nikas and I, Joanna did all Bill's videos that went online, and we were at Carnegie Hall giving the speech, and I made sure I said to the woman, "Are you sure my speech is out there?" And she goes, "Look, this is what we do for a living." Sure enough, it wasn't out there. So I had to ad lib, as they would say.
And you're wearing the same shirt?
Probably. No, a little darker.
Okay, your Bill blue shirt.
The team color.
Yes. Following Bill's death, the outpouring of love for him was beyond comprehension. Department store windows were dedicated to him. Fashion powerhouses took out ads of appreciation in the Times. Thousands signed a petition to rename 57th Street and Fifth Avenue Bill Cunningham Corner, and I was one of them, and it happened. I don't know for how long it happened, but it happened. So I'm sure you're asking, how did we two get up here together? And we'll tell that story, but more importantly, for so many of the great ladies of New York, the consensus was there's just no reason to get dressed up anymore. And while that statement may be a bit exaggerated, there's a bit of truth to that. Bill was one of the last holdouts of a certain kind of elegance and decorum in dress, but he left behind amazing gifts, and for me, it was a new friendship. And like so many friendships these days, like my marriage, it began online. So, John, this is the email dated June 11th, 2013, and I cannot tell you how embarrassed I am to reveal that I was still using AOL then.
And that's when we started communicating, is because Bill wanted to send you a photo. You must have gave him your email address, and you responded to me. I responded back, because when Bill told you to do something, you did it.
And this is the photo that he sent me, so we have Alexandra Liebenthal to thank. So here we are, meeting in person for the very first time.
At the hat luncheon.
At the Central Park Hat Luncheon, and who knows where the wind will blow us as we continue to tell the story of working for Bill. It's a good one. So, John, I look forward to many more chats with you. It's been an absolute joy, and let's leave them with this thought. When Bill was awarded the title of Officer of the Order of Arts and Letters by the French Ministry of Culture in 2008, he tearfully accepted with these few words that will forever define this extraordinary man. It's as true today as it ever was. He who seeks beauty will find it. Here's to Bill.
Thanks. Thanks.
So, does anyone have any questions? John would probably be able to answer them better than me, but anyone?
Are you all working on a book at all with some of this work?
Are you a literary agent?
I just have funny stories to tell.
The answer is we'd love to. When John and I started talking, I felt that we should start it with a conversation and do talks like this. And if a book is there, and of course, you all know, the Times is doing an extraordinary retrospective book on Bill's work for the Times. I think it's going to be called Bill Cunningham's New York, and it's going to be a large coffee table book, and it's going to come out in the fall, and that's going to be one. That'll probably be the definitive book. I think that John does have an extraordinary story to tell, and I think that it will reveal itself the more that we do talks like this. So stay tuned. Yes?
John, there were probably many times.
Yeah.
There were probably many times, but can you recount a time when the two of you just laughed and laughed? What happened?
Every morning, we would be like two washerwomen. And of course, again, I got that from my mother. That's when the old lady, but we would sit there and drink our coffee. Bill would have his hard roll. He would scoop out the inners, put the butter on it, and we would sit there and talk about what happened at a party, who was being a thug, because when security would deny him access to events, he would just turn around and leave. And all of a sudden, all these beautifully dressed women would be running after him to come back. And he would turn and say, no, you have those thugs up there. I'm not coming back. Because they wouldn't let him in with his camera. They were like, you can't come in. You can't have a camera. He goes, I'm with the press. And, nope, can't come in. So he would leave. But it was crazy stories like that was our every day. And then the intensity of doing our pages that we loved. You know, he was always worried that the public was getting bored with his pages. And I was like, I get emails on Friday at 4 o'clock if it's not up on the web. He goes, they email you about that? I like, yeah, we had to yell at Joanna for that. And that was our little thing with Joanna. But he loved to hear those compliments and stuff like that. So thank you.
Over there. I feel like Carol Burnett.
Oh my God, Carol Burnett.
What happened to his files?
The archives. From 1993 to 2016 are the property of the New York Times, I believe. That was the final verdict. Anything up until 93 is the families. And I'm sure everyone's doing books and stuff like that. So,
we know he's irreplaceable, but did the Times... He's irreplaceable, but did the Times try to find somebody and give up on it, or...
I think they were going in a newer, younger generation aspect.
Influencers and that kind of...
Yeah.
You know, as a loyal reader, the proof is in the pudding. Is there a reason to grab your, try to get the style section early before the weekend? I remember going on Saturday nights to 7-Eleven trying to get it before, so I could look at Bill's pages. Is there a reason to do that anymore? I don't think so.
It was amazing how many people, like I said, would email me to see if they made it, and I'm like, maybe you should buy the paper.
And if you
if we liked them, I would like. Give
and
them
if you
that
didn't
little
make
tease.
it, you left town.
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a
And
disappointment.
what are you doing now? What are you...
I'm very bored right now. No. Working with Bill took a lot of time, and it was intense. If you saw the documentary, I choked him. That was our little comic routine.
But you're still working at the Times.
I'm still working at the Times, but it's not as fun as that.
It's like there's no reason to get dressed up anymore.
Thank God I didn't have to.
Are the photographs available from the archives? If you had a specific photograph, are you able to find it and purchase it, or?
Let me guess, you're a woman in a black dress with blonde hair that went to a black and white ball.
Not at all.
No, you can contact the New York Times to see if you made it into the Times, and if you for sure Bill took your photo, because Bill also liked to do when people were being a pest, he just liked to click the camera so you thought you got shot. That was a little inside joke.
He did that
we
to me about 400 times.
He would do that. He goes, this person wouldn't leave me the hell alone.
Well,
And he kept
remember,
coming
he
back.
didn't want to waste film. But I think I can help answer this because I've done it. If you know that your picture appeared in the Times and you have the date, then it's easy.
And
Then-
contact
then
the New York
yes.
Times, and they can
Yeah,
probably help you.
this- Is it called circulation? No. What is it called? Archives. Yeah.
Archives. But
Just
I
the
don't-
archives. But you can get it. Absolutely. Absolutely, you can get it.
Quick question, is anything going to the National Archives in D.C., any of his work?
I'm not aware of anything. I haven't heard of anything like that.
Julia's Kitchen, I think we should have go there.
I think that's a wonderful idea, having seen Julia Child's Kitchen and to see Bill Cunningham's studio, maybe.
That'd be nice.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Because all it would take is 4 milk crates and a sheet of plywood.
Don't forget the foam mattress. You have
Yes.
to bring the foam mattress.
Well, I think are we ready to have a little drinky?
Drink.
Good. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
And
Thank you so much.
And here's to Bill.